And we're back. We're back, Will.
Against our own wills. Yes, we're back against our own will.
We're back. Back again. Guess who's back?
Harry's friends.
As you all know by now, or maybe you don't, maybe this is your first episode watching. If it is, I would suggest you going back to the first.
I don't know why you would jump in at the Deathly Hallows part one. You're like, this is probably a good one, guys.
We are Two Christians Watch. We are a podcast under Metamorphic Site Productions. And we watch cinema from a Christian perspective and then talk about it from a Christian perspective. We see film as spiritually valuable, having innate properties that reflect the beauty and truth of God. Kind of a tagline we're working for the podcast, but we love films.
We come to the theater. Sorry, I can't steal that from Nicole Kidman.
No, honestly, brilliant. You want to continue? Can you do an Australian accent?
No, and I can't even. Seriously, if for some reason AMC movie theaters are listening to this podcast, please, it's been 2 years. Be done with this little Nicole Kidman. Why we come to movie theaters. We know why we come to movie theaters. You don't need to tell me why we come to movie theaters, especially after I've already bought a ticket.
But here, we think that film is a true art form. And we even love bad movies. We love a good camp, a good romp. And sometimes we have very serious talks about films where we really dive deep into the spiritual truths about it. You know, we peel back the layers of like cinematography and the use of music and lighting and mise-en-scène and the actors' performances and really dive deep.
Literally look at our God's Not Dead series for more proof of how in-depth we could be and more how critical we can be. But once you get to episode 7 of a saga, we start running out of in-depth things we have already said in these movies.
Yeah, I was gonna say we're not really doing that here for the Harry Potter series.
This is true as well. We are literally what is a Christian's initial thoughts from seeing this, and it's not a matter of my faith that's rubbing against it. It's my experience with other better films and the fact that this was not meant for me at this age. It was not really pitched to the 30-year-old demographic. It was pitched to, between 10 and 17, 18. And it's just hard sometimes sitting through and watching and trying to remember, oh, by the way, while you can enjoy this, it really wasn't meant for you. It was meant for the kids who were growing up with these movies as they were being released. And so it takes a little bit of maturity on my part to admit that this was not, designed for me to get enjoyment out of initially.
Right. And then adding on to that, when it was our time to enjoy it, because we were, I guess around the age, we were a little younger than when this initially came out, but it was a big evangelical scare because we grew up, I grew up non-denominational. Actually, I started Lutheran and then grew up non-denominational. And I think, are you considered Baptist, Southern Baptist when you were a kid?
No, they said the closest thing we are is Baptist, but we're non-denominational, but very strict non-denominational. Like our rules make our faith rather than our faith makes our faith.
So, and one of the unspoken and very spoken rules sometimes was that Harry Potter was the devil. We don't consume it. We don't watch it. We don't talk about it. We don't read it. And then as I got older, so I didn't read it. Like other kids were reading it at the time. But as I got older, my dad actually was like, hey, I've done some prayer about this. I've grown spiritually. And obviously, if you can tell that it's fiction, then you can enjoy it if you'd like. And then I was like, okay. And then I never went back to it. I never got into it. I think I read the first book and I didn't even finish it. And then I saw a couple movies here and there. So this is the first time I've been watching through it all the way, as well as for you, Will, right?
Yes. Now, I was just thinking, now, while it's not the same thing for religious purposes, I wonder if our kids are going to look at the Hunger Games saga the same way we're looking at these movies. They're weird, they don't make a lot of sense, they're silly, or X, Y, or Z, whatever. Are they going to look at it as critically as we're looking at the Harry Potter movies? Because the Hunger Games movies came out when we were in late high school, early college, and they were meant for our demographic. And 10 years from now, 15 years from now, our kids, our generation's kids, going to look at those movies and think they're campy or whatever.
I mean, yeah, I was not a Hunger Games girl. I don't know. Did you watch them or read them or?
I saw Mockingjay Part 2 in theaters, and I've seen all of the films. Again, I think I've seen better movies, but I've seen all of them, so I understand where they are, and at least cinematically, for the most part, they're really well made, and it's a giant journey you have to go on to follow Katniss Everdeen, just like Harry Potter, just like Luke Skywalker, just like Frodo Baggins. You start on a journey of several movies and follow them to the end. But it's funny, for the most part, there are generations, a generation or two down the road, and they look back on the thing that was big when we were growing up, and they look at it differently than we did.
Maybe we'll get Hunger Games in the pod in the future. I don't know. Those dystopian YA novels of the 2010s. And this isn't a dystopian YA novel, but Twilight will always, it will reign supreme throughout time. I'll have our kids watch Twilight. If we have daughters, like, I'm going to be showing them Twilight when the time comes. Just saying. I guess maybe Harry Potter too, but I don't know. Like, it's going to be odd if like our kids want to watch Harry Potter and they're like the right age and like they're like getting into it, and then I'm like, well, at least they like it, but it's like because they're younger, it's speaking to their level. Now we are like the one we are on the Deathly Hallows Part 1. So they split. I just was reminded of this the other day. The phenomenon of taking the last big book of like a series, like a YA series like this, and splitting it into 2 movies started with Harry Potter. Harry Potter did it first. And
it's funny because, I remember that. I mean, Mockingjay Part 1 and 2, Harry Potter, Deathly Hallows Part 1 and 2, Breaking Dawn Part 1 and 2. And then Peter Jackson, for all that he's lauded for, looked at one singular book known as The Hobbit, and it was like, I think, 3 movies is good. What do you think? 3 movies? Let's do 3 movies.
Is The Hobbit, like, how is it lauded by the Lord of the Rings fans? Is it controversial? Is it loved?
It's beloved.
It's beloved.
I mean,
okay.
It's spoken in the same breath for the most part as the trilogy, and it's almost, I consider required reading to fully understand the trilogy. So I've read The Hobbit 5 times, and I love it.
I meant the movies.
There's some things they get right. There's a couple of great scenes that they get right. They add a bunch to it from outside sources, from notes, from the desire to have a romantic interest that's not there, that just plods the story. They add a bunch of extra stuff, and honestly, it could have been made into 2 films. Instead, 3 feels massively stretched, and plus, weirdly enough, the CGI is really bad compared to the near perfection of the original trilogy, which is kind of funny because you see that here in in the Harry Potter movies. For some reason, the CGI in the second movie is really, really good, and then progressively it gets on and off bad and subpar to okay to passable in the rest of the saga. It's very interesting at how a multi-million-dollar company could like keep changing how it allocates its funds for CGI or computer-generated images, and also maybe not just funds, but like how much time do we want to spend on this scene? It's very interesting. I would love to do like a thought piece one day on like, is CGI the bane of movie goers' existence, or can it be used when used properly to elevate the cinematic experience?
I mean, we don't want to get, that's not this podcast right now. I think my little 2 cents is that it is good if there's limits put on it, like creative limit. When people are just like, we'll just throw everything into CGI, I think that's when we get carried away. But if there's like logical limits put to it, kind of like with the second movie with the Basilisk, where they had some CGI, but then they had some shots where they could get away with puppet, and that added to the scene, so they limited the CGI in that. Okay, but we have to start talking about this movie, which we kind of don't want to do because this is actually the worst rated one on Rotten Tomatoes, right?
77% on Rotten Tomatoes. Now, again, that is passing, but when the other films are in the 80s and 90s, with the only one worse, I believe, was Order of the Phoenix at 78. The rest are in the 80s and 90s. 77 is the lowest rated Harry Potter film, and it's for good reason, because I would say 90% of this film is non-important. It is just drama for the sake of drama, and we'll get into that, but whenever you hear my summary, it is pretty thin, pretty basic.
How about you go into your thin, basic summary?
Okay. So we are dropped hard into some actually interesting plot. So the 3 main characters are basically either sending their families away or leaving their families. Hermione mind-numbingly decides to erase her family's memory of her, so that she is, if basically, I gotta backtrack just a smidge. The Death Eaters are now taking over London, taking over the UK, at the behest of the newly risen Dark Lord Voldemort. And so, of course, the number one person they come after and they want is Harry, but they're also going to want any mudbloods. They're going to want any wizard that would be contentious to their plan. And so the prime 3 targets are probably Ron, Hermione, and Harry. So Hermione erases her parents' memory of her, so that if the Death Eaters come to her house, they can't give her any information. I forget what Ron does. What does Ron have?
His family is kind of the center of the rescue mission.
That's right. And we'll get to that. And then Harry decides that he is going to somehow convince his guardians, the people we've seen throughout these entire movies that have been bullies to him, to leave. And I still don't understand how he was able to do that. They just kind of like assumed that conversation happened, where these people who hated him, who hated his existence, who constantly berated and mocked him and verbally abused him, he just comes up to them and tells them they need to leave because Voldemort wants to kill them, and they just leave. And yes, the mom is the sister, that mom, the woman, is the sister of his mom. There's no real building to that where they would trust him. So anyways, they leave London, and their house is just abandoned. And so Mad-Eye Moody, the Weasleys, Lupin, Hagrid, Harry, Hermione, and Ron, the guardians of Harry, and they're like, okay, Harry needs to be protected at all costs because we need to protect Harry, but Harry also has to defeat Voldemort. And we know that the Death Eaters are going to do anything in their power to get him. So we've come up with a plan. We're going to once again use Polyjuice Potion, turn everybody in our party, well, most everybody, about 70% of our party, into Harry, so nobody will know which one's the real one. And what we're going to do is we're going to fly out in the dead of night on broomsticks, motorcycles with Hagrid, and we're going to fly out over London and get to the Weasley house. And we're going to rendezvous there and put a shield over it so we can be protected and we can figure out our next step of plan. So they all do the plan. They get up into the sky, and then once they get through the clouds are teeming with Death Eaters. And so Hagrid has the real Harry, and they're trying to get to the Weasley household, and they're ambushed. They're attacked by Death Eaters. Death Eaters end up killing Mad-Eye Moody. Death Eaters end up killing the Harry's owl, and they have this chase scene. Once they realize that Harry is there, Voldemort arrives and tries to attack Harry. Harry destroys Voldemort's wand, and Voldemort escapes. They get to the Weasley household. They get through the shield barrier and they're protected. They find out one of the Weasley brothers is injured from the fight. And so they're like, okay, we need to take this seriously. So what's the first thing we're going to do? We're going to have a wedding. We're going to have the wedding of the oldest Weasley brother and a woman.
I think, I could be wrong, but I think he married the wizard who was competing in the Triwizard tournament in the Goblet of Fire.
Okay.
The blonde girl. I think that's her, but I could be wrong.
Maybe. Anyways, they have a wedding, and you're like, okay, they're going to have a quiet little wedding. No, they have a regular like wedding you would think of, like a big party. But before that, the new Minister of Magic comes to visit Harry, Hermione, and Ron, and he's like, hey, in his last will and testament, Dumbledore left you each something. Harry, we've left you the first, what is those things called?
A snitch.
The first snitch from your first victory in Quidditch. Ron, we have left you a lamp that when you turn it on, all the light in the nearby room will suck in towards it. So it'll go pitch black, and then you can use it to light your way, and it's going to be a bright light when you need it. And then Hermione, we've given you a book of fairy tales. And Harry also was given the Sword of Gryffindor, but question mark. We don't know where it is. It's gone missing. And so he's like, that's all I got for you guys. Peace out. So they're like, okay, we're going to go and celebrate this wedding. They run into the dad of Luna Lovegood, and Luna, and they're at the wedding, and the dad is acting a little weird. I
think he's just weird.
Okay.
I don't think he's acting weird.
He's just weird. And so they're like, okay. And then Harry overhears an elderly couple conversation about people who knew Dumbledore and wrote about Dumbledore's life and the people he knew and where Dumbledore came from. So Dumbledore's hometown. While they're all celebrating, the Death Eaters attack. Somehow or another, they get through the shield barrier and they pretty much destroy the party. And the three heroes disapparate.
Yeah, Hermione disapparates them into like London or something, in the middle of London.
Yeah, they go into the middle of London and they're like, what's going on? And so they hide out in Sirius Black's house, and they're like, okay, we need to get back onto those Horcruxes. We need to go find them. Long story short, which is like a bunch of nonsense that gets strung together, they find out that the necklace that was supposed to be in the purple liquid from the last movie, the real necklace is in the Ministry of Magic, which has been taken over by Voldemort, his goons, and the Death Eaters. and it's around the neck of
Dolores Umbridge.
I want to say Elderridge, and that's not right.
I always want to call her Dumbridge, and I'm like, I think that's like the nickname everyone has for her.
Umbridge. Okay, so the real one is around the neck of Umbridge. So they polyjuice potion again. They
polyjuice potion their way a lot through this movie.
They knock out 3 random wizards who work at the ministry under the goons, under the bad guys. So they polyjuice their way in. They sneak into the ministry because they're planning on basically ambushing Umbridge, taking the Horcrux, and piecing out. In the process, they basically witness how bad it's gotten, where certain wizards are being targeted, certain wizards are being surveillanced, and certain wizards are being tortured. They are finally able to ambush Umbridge, and they take the locket, and they are on the run. Now everybody knows that they are looking for Horcruxes, and they are being chased throughout the greater area of Great Britain by Death Eaters. So they disapparate again into the forest, and they go on an hour-long escapade of camping, trying to destroy this Horcrux and arguing with each other. I'm just going to cut that short because it's forever. Basically, Ron keeps thinking that Harry is trying to get with Hermione, so Ron pieces out and leaves them high and dry. Hermione and Harry are trying to figure out how to open this lock, as well as uncover some secrets that Dumbledore left. So Dumbledore basically left a bunch of hints to where the sword is, as well as the next step for them. And so they stumble into these hints by going back to the place that Harry's parents died, as well as the place that Dumbledore grew up. So they get some more information, and they are finally able to piece it all together by going and finding the Lovegood dad again. It turns out Luna has been captured by...
I think you skipped the part where Ron randomly shows up in the woods.
Okay, I thought that happened afterwards. I apologize. Yeah, so they're, again, an hour of back and forth camping. They keep disapparating to new campsites in really nice scenic locations. Eventually, Ron comes back in the nick of time. So it's snowing out. It's icy. Harry looks late at night into this frozen lake, and he sees the sword of Gryffindor.
There was a Patronus that led him there, the doe.
Yes. But we'll get to that. But basically, how did the sword get in this lake? They don't even know. The person who stole the sword doesn't even know. Anyways, we'll get to that. But so he finds the sword frozen in a lake. There's a Patronus of a deer that leads him there. And he decides, I know what I'm going to do. This is a frozen lake. I'm going to dive in. It's important to know that at this point, they still have the locket. And the locket, which is the Horcrux from Voldemort, is basically tied around each one of their necks occasionally and causes them to have visions of Voldemort and start having the rage and anger of Voldemort. Very similar to another thing that we're going to get to. I don't want to spoil our conversations, but we will get to it. So Harry's under the water with this necklace on, this locket. It starts drowning him. Ron arrives, pulls him out, and with the sword, they both come out, and they're like, okay, we got to destroy this locket because Voldemort is sending us signals, basically. So Ron opens the locket up, and Ron has his worst fears appear to him, and he's able to conquer it, take the sword, and destroy the locket. And so they're like, okay, the next step is to follow these hints from Dumbledore. So they've destroyed 3 Horcruxes, and so they're going to let's go to that weird guy from the party. So they go to the Lovegood father, who admits to them that Luna was kidnapped by the Death Eaters to torture her, and he tells them the story of the Deathly Hallows, which are basically, it's a legend of 3 items that were given by Death to 3 wizards because they outsmarted Death. And so one of them is the invisible cloak, one of them is a very powerful wand, and one of them is a device that can raise the dead. And so with all 3 of these, if somebody has possession of all 3 of these, they can defeat death and they can live eternally. And so they understand that this is a big issue and that they need to figure that out. But while they were doing that, Lovegood has basically betrayed them because he's hoping that if he betrays them to the Death Eaters, that they'll give him his daughter back. So they go on the run. They are captured by the Death Eaters. Right before they get captured, Hermione disfigures Harry temporarily in the face so they can't identify him.
We'll get into that whole thing.
Anyways, so they capture all 3 of them. They take them to the Malfoy house, and the Malfoy house is basically bad guy headquarters. I think of like evil secret lair, and Bellatrix is there, and a bunch of goons and the Malfoys. And Bellatrix is like kind of acting like the second in command, where she's being a jerk to everybody, acting like she has authority. And so it's a big deal. They basically throw Ron and Harry into a dungeon, and they They are torturing Hermione by carving mud blood into her arm.
They think she stole the sword of Gryffindor.
Right. So when I said earlier, the person who stole it doesn't know where she got it from. Basically, Bellatrix says that she stole the sword of Gryffindor, put it in her like safe at the bank from the first movie.
Yes.
And she put it in her safe, and somehow or another she doesn't, because Bellatrix is like, how did you get this? Where did you get it? And she's like, we found it. We didn't take it from anything. And so Bellatrix doesn't know how it ended up in the lake. Hermione doesn't know how it ended up in the lake. Nobody knows how it ended up in that frozen lake. And so Bellatrix doesn't believe Hermione. She's torturing Hermione. Harry and Ron are like, we need to go help. And in this like dungeon is like a couple of their friends, including Luna Lovegood. And so Harry pulls out this mirror that he has. It's a mirror shard, and he's like, he looks into it. He's like, I need somebody to help me. Like he's pressing OnStar in his car, and out of nowhere, a rare Dobby appears, and Dobby's like, I'm here to help Harry. And so he disapparates anybody who's not Ron and Harry out of the dungeon to a safe area, and then he's like, okay, here's what we're gonna do. And so he basically gets Ron and Harry out of the dungeon by knocking out Peter Pettigrew, and they get out and back to the lobby to help Hermione. Dobby has a sword, and they're like, I'm gonna get you. Harry has a brief duel with Lucius Malfoy, and they're able to disapparate. And while they're disapparating, Bellatrix throws a knife. And when they get to where they're disapparating to, they find out the knife went through the portal into Dobby, killing Dobby. And they're mourning the loss of this house elf, and they're on this beach far away from the house, far away from the lair of the bad guys. They bury Dobby, and they're now on the journey to find the last Horcruxes to hopefully defeat Voldemort. Meanwhile, in the background of this entire movie, every once in a while there's a vision or a flashback to Voldemort interrogating a bunch of people to try to find where the wand was. That's one of the Deathly Hallows.
The Elder Wand.
The Elder Wand. And so this is a very powerful wand, the most powerful wand. He's interrogating wizards, he's killing wizards, torturing wizards to get information to where this might be. And he finally gets the information that it's buried with Dumbledore. So he goes to the grave of Dumbledore, desecrates the grave, opens it up, and steals it from the cold, dead hands of Dumbledore. And now the movie ends with Voldemort raising the Elder Wand to the sky, claiming 1/3 of the most powerful objects in this universe. And we are left on a cliffhanger as the credits roll.
Okay, that was a great summary. Thank you for that. So the first thing we got to talk about that this one we saw more than the others had a lot of convenience and storytelling. So let me see what I have the examples if I want to do them in order. So Hermione's bag. We didn't even mention that.
Where did she get the bag? Did she say she bought it somewhere?
She enchanted it.
Okay. Basically, so in the Marvel comics, Deadpool has a bag of basically anything he wants he can pull out of it. No matter what the size, no matter what the object, he can do whatever he wants. It's meant on purpose to break the universe because it's Deadpool. It's supposed to be funny. Hermione literally, so there's a moment where when they have to leave the wedding, she has this bag and she's like, hey, so when I found out about the Horcruxes and us having to potentially go into hiding, I decided I'm going to enchant this bag, and I have put weeks worth of clothes for each of us in this bag, tents, all the utensils we would need, all the tent supplies we would need, books and medicine, and the bag is endless. And anything basically from then on out, if there's something they need, it's in the bag.
Yeah, it just was a device to kind of get that part of the logical part of the story out of the way of oh, you're on the run in the woods with nothing around. So she just had this enchanted bag and she thought to put all of this stuff in there.
I think one of the things, it's probably a marketing thing / wardrobe thing, but they're like, we really don't want these kids
in the same clothes
because they're there for weeks on end, they said, and yet every single shot they have a new set of clothes on.
Yeah.
And you're like, they had, let's just be kind to say 20 days worth of clothes in this bag.
I know.
And then she had the foresight to be like, let me pack clothes for each one of us for 20 days and then put it in the bag.
I know. She has a whole tent. I'm surprised she doesn't have a generator in there for electricity, even though they don't need that technically. But it was just it's just a device, like I said, to kind of take out the worry of that logic part of the story of they're traveling on foot and how are they going to survive. But I mean, yeah, this is a world where magic exists. And so they did use it to their advantage at this point. J.K. Rowling did. But it is convenient. So Dobby shows up before the end of the movie. Remember, he just randomly shows up when they're staying at Sirius's house. Sirius still has Creature, the house elf, and he has the information about the locket. And they said, hey, you need to go find the guy that took the locket, which was, we met him in the beginning of the movie. I don't think we've ever met him before. He's like a little sly, like Weasley person. And so Creature goes out to find him, and Dobby just happens to be there when Creature finds him. And so Dobby shows up and is like, hey, I'm here too. It was very odd. And like, then he comes back at the end. Did he add anything to that scene he was in randomly when he came back with Creature?
It was more like, surprise, we saw characters you remember from other movies in this movie, because we get to the point where we get almost no other characters except for the three main characters. It's just a stretch of an hour of just those three. And so it's like, oh, we're preparing for that because here's a character you cared about from 4 movies ago. Remember this character? Here he is. And that's what it basically becomes, is like, remember this character? They're there sometimes.
Yeah, and then also Dobby is also the huge convenience. He's the thing that saves them all. What's it called? The thing that I always say it wrong.
The Ex Machina?
Yeah.
So basically, you go from a character who's like, I like Harry Potter, but I'm going to make life hard for Harry Potter, and I'm going to do things because I like the way I think to do them, the way I think they do it right, to Dobby is like brilliant and like a strategist, and he knows exactly how to do things, and he knows how to like think 2 steps ahead. And it's like the character you've built from 5 movies ago is not this character we're seeing in this movie.
And then another big thing we're missing with this whole thing with Dobby showing up at the end is that he comes because Harry asks the mirror shard for help. And I have written down, where did he get the mirror shard? What does it do? It's never been mentioned before. He just has it. And he sees like a strange face in it, doesn't he? And he's like, we need help to the mirror shard. And supposedly this was in the book. Like, it was mentioned in the book at some point and it never made it into the movies. And then it became a huge detail in the last movie. And they're like, well, too late to go back and add those scenes. I guess we're just going to add it into the movie. But it makes no sense. I don't know what it is. I don't know how he got it. I don't know why Dobby came when he said we need help into it.
Who he's talking to.
Who's the person in the other like set of eyes he saw or whatnot. It's a little spooky moment with the mirror shard. For a second, I thought it was a mirror shard of the mirror from the first movie, but I was like,
they didn't break.
Also, that's not how that mirror works. You can't ask it for things.
You also can't. You're not going to see other people unless you see your own reflection. So
yeah. The most convenient, and so it's not even Dobby, the most convenient and crazy part of this movie is the sword and Ron coming back randomly. So Ron leaves, he gets mad and runs away. And then right after that, I think Hermione disapparates them. So literally, like, Ron walks out the tent and then they disapparate. So he's like, I don't know where they went. Like, he just leaves them wherever he is. And so Ron actually starts to try to find them after that, because he just, obviously she went to a random location. And the thing that Dumbledore left him, we actually saw in the first movie, in the first scene of the movie. It's the thing that takes the lights out of the street lights on Privet Drive. All we know was that it basically takes a light source magically from the room, and I guess he can use it to like light a way or something after that. And then he says he's in a pub and he's being chased, and he feels like he's just like down on he's just down, and he's at the end of his rope, and he just really wants to be with his friends again. And then he says he hears Hermione's voice, and then the light comes out of the device or whatever it is, the deluminator or whatever it's called, and then it passes through him, and then he's suddenly in the woods, and he's there when Harry is drowning in the lake of ice, and he's able to save and he grabs the sword at the same time too. He's able to save Harry and grab the sword. It still doesn't make any sense to me. I mean, I guess it's supposed to be like a metaphor, or like a kind of like I don't know what the right word to use.
He was like, I bet Dumbledore gave this to me because he knew I was going to run away, and he knew that I was going to need to come back to my friends. I'm like, so Dumbledore's like, Ron goes aloof. I really want to give him something that's going to teleport him, or at least take him to where he needs to go, even though it would be kind of insanity to think like, okay, he not only is able to find them in the nick of time, but also if you saw where they keep going, so they keep disapparating every couple days to keep ahead of the Death Eaters. They go to the mountains, they go to the middle of nowhere, they go to a forest, they go to a lake, and you're telling me the thing is able to either teleport Ron all the way there, or that he's able to traverse all of this in enough time to get to Harry in time. It's again, suspension of disbelief can only go so far.
I think it has something to do with, so the Gryffindor sword being in the lake. And the first time we see the Gryffindor sword, it says it presents itself to the Gryffindor that like needs it the most or something. So I think that has something to do with why it's there. But I think it's also maybe the Illuminator is like Ron's own desire and magic is what led him there. And I get that. It's kind of like the power of love and friendship and like heart and like his love for Hermione and everything like that. Like that's the power behind this whole scene. I kind of get that's what they're going for, but it felt very, do you have a good word to describe?
No, but so here's the thing. I could buy one thing like this. I can buy one object in one universe that is like fixer of all problems or instant teleportation to wherever you need to be or whatever you need it from now. Like the Gryffindor sword will go to whoever needs it the most at the moment. Great. Or the Deluminator will take you to the friends when you need them the most. Great. Or the bag. Great. But you have one movie with all of these things. And then this is not even the first time. Like we have this whole universe is full of so many objects that immediately fix all the problems in the movie or is like the key fix that all they need to do is depend on the device or it just magically works to their, I know, magic.
Magically.
But there's only so far you can go with magic before it becomes ludicrousy. And so this movie has 4 devices that are just like instant fixes to any problem. And so is there really any threat at all? I mean, I get it. They get caught by the Death Eaters at the end. But again, they are saved by the shard, the mirror shard. I mean, they get in trouble, they have the bag. If they need help, they got the sword. If they get lost, they've got the Illuminator. Then what's the point of any issue?
And yeah, and that's kind of rubbing up against what we said about how conveniently, again, there's times where they can't do things with certain things with magic, or they won't, like the time turner, or what was the other thing that was like, why don't they just do this? Oh, like flume powder and port keys, and like, why do they fly to the Weasleys? Why didn't they apparate there? Like, why didn't they flume there? Like,
right. I didn't even think about that. That makes me angry. Why didn't they? I mean, there obviously had to have been a fireplace at the Guardian household that Harry was at. They had to have been able to disapparate. Or heaven forbid, if you had the argument, oh, you can't disapparate because of the shield they had up at the Weasley house, disapparate right near the shield and then walk in. Why are you doing this? Like, you're doing this for the sake of causing conflict. Like the same reason why would Ron need to leave? Why does Ron need to abandon them? Like, where are you going to go, Ron? Like, you don't know where your family is. You don't know where your friends are. You're in the middle of nowhere and you're going to just leave?
Yeah, I mean, it's the ring. Oh, sorry, it's the locket making him think and do these things. I think we should just jump into it because it's very obvious.
You're going to have to take over this one because I'm going to get real angry real quick because I love the Lord of the Rings. I grew up with it. So the way that people in our generation grew up with Harry Potter, the way that they were Potterheads, I adored the Lord of the Rings. I loved it so much. I had cakes designed after Lord of the Rings. I had the action figures. I had play sets. I had magnets and stickers and cards. You name it, I had it. I loved it. What she's about to describe to you made me furious. I had to pause the movie and get angry because this is just blatant copyright infringement.
I don't know if it's copyright infringement, but it's definitely borrowing heavily. So they get this locket. The locket is imbued with evil, just like the ring. It's so imbued with evil that when they wear it, like around their neck, like Frodo does, it takes a toll on you mentally and spiritually, just like the ring. And so Hermione's like, we will take turns carrying the burden, which I think Frodo, like, he kind of fights that a lot in the Lord of the Rings, where he's like, no, it's my job. I should take it. I think Sam takes it from him a couple times, but
also it directly connects you almost to Voldemort. Like he can't see your location, but especially Harry will have visions of Voldemort while having the locket on. That he'll see visions of Voldemort torturing somebody, or he'll see him talking to somebody through the locket being around his neck. And it changes your personality, it changes your mood, it changes your outlook, and it literally is. If you just switched it out for the ring, you wouldn't even know. There's very little difference.
Also, this movie is just about them journeying and walking around, which is pretty much Fellowship of the Ring. I think all films are like, all 3 films are like that, though. They're walking and journeying.
But guess what? What's the goal? What's the end goal of the walking?
To destroy it somehow. Yes. And so we were watching this and I was just like, they had to do this on purpose. I mean, not the movie. They're just adapting the book, but J.K. Rowling had to have done this on purpose. And she might be like, oh, I'm referencing it, which I understand. But I mean,
there's a difference between referencing and almost copy pasting. Like this is a bad paraphrase. If she was writing this, or if somebody was writing this, and it would almost look like it was a bad paraphrasing, or like somebody said, you got to change it up to make it your own. Like change Ring to Locket, change Frodo to Harry. It's the same thing. It's just different like names on it.
I will say, watching the Fellowship tromp around the wilderness, more entertaining than watching Harry, Ron, and Hermione do it. I don't know why, but
I think part of it is the drama that comes from the Fellowship feels natural because you got a bunch of strangers who are now being forced to risk their lives to protect a couple four pretty much defenseless creatures, and they also have to trust the leadership of a wizard to get them to this location, and they know that they are pretty much on a suicide mission, and so they're obviously frustrated and obviously tense, and one of them is obviously tempted to just end it all and take it and just do what he's got to do with it because he wants to save his homeland. So there's tension there. It makes sense. We've been with these characters for Harry Potter for 7 movies. And they've not ironed out their friendship in 7 years to where they're like learning how to communicate better.
Oh yeah, that's a big one. They don't communicate well at all.
No, they don't work as a team well, almost at all. They don't plan out anything very well at all. And
except Hermione.
Yeah, but Hermione just comes up with a plan, but sometimes she doesn't even think through the plan. And then it always divulges into some kind of like random drama, like Ron leaving or Harry getting upset or Hermione feeling jealous. And all it would take is you guys have been friends, quote unquote, for 7 years. You guys haven't learned to just sit down and like, let's talk about what's going on here. Let's just iron this out so we can move on, especially in the situation we're in. We are literally in a life or death situation that if Harry dies, it's all over.
Yeah.
And you guys can't, swallow down your pride a little bit and figure out how to work together for a little bit longer instead of pouting and crying and getting angry at each other. And I get it. The locket is influencing them.
Oh, but this has happened way before the locket.
Yeah, but yeah, this is like the 3rd movie this has kind of happened with, and they haven't grown together at all. And then you're expecting me to believe that they have natural chemistry when they have a romantic relationship, or that Harry for some reason is now also slightly interested in Hermione. I'm like, you have a so-called girlfriend who may be dead, and your friends are all either trying to fight for you or in jail or dead, and you're too busy writing about trying to start up another relationship. Ron and Hermione. Ron and Hermione, Harry and Hermione. They have a whole like slow dancing, nuzzling scene.
I don't think that he was trying to be romantic. I think he was. You're like, yeah, right.
Oh, come on. They were 2 seconds away from kissing, and then they thought the better of it. But there was very much flirting, and it was
a trauma bond.
Trauma bond 7 movies into this universe, and you're telling me it took this long to get a trauma bond?
They're all trauma bonded together.
No, they're not.
Yes, they are.
No, because they all hate each other.
That's what.
And then you're supposed to get me to believe that Ron and Hermione are supposed to be meant to be.
Yeah, I don't know if I buy that. A lot of the fans don't either, supposedly.
Lavender and Ron forever.
Actually, we were on the subject. Luna and Harry, they have so much more chemistry and cute moments than even Harry and Hermione. What do you think? I vote Luna and Harry.
Ginny and Harry, it was super forced. Like, it doesn't make any sense. And I definitely think Lovegood, like you could say like 5 years down the road, they end up together, Lovegood and Harry. Like that makes sense. One is more bold and more daring, and one is more reserved but thoughtful. There you go.
Going back to the inconsistencies we were talking about before, they use polyjuice potion like a lot in this movie. And the first time we saw it was in Chamber of Secrets, I believe. And they said it took like months to make in that movie, but they use it all the time. And so I'm like, did they just make like a huge batch of it and just have like it on backstock so they could just like take care, put it in there and make, or did they buy it? Like, I just thought it took a long time to make, but they use it so much. It felt overused in this movie. And then
the thing that feels underused is Hermione's healing potion.
Dittany or whatever it was called.
Yes.
Yeah.
So she'll use it on Ron when Ron is critically injured in one scene, but she won't use it on Ron's brother who is bleeding out on a carpet.
So I don't know. Maybe it was because he got cursed. Like, I think what happened was that Ron just got like his arm really badly cut, but it wasn't like a curse. So it wasn't like a magical thing. So
this is literally what I've been saying every time we do one of these podcasts. They don't explain the lore well enough to where people can walk away from a movie and say, I don't understand how this fully works. Why does this happen and not this? Why can you do it this way and not that way? Why can you go and do this magic thing now, but not earlier or this moment? It's not like it's explained like, oh, this potion is only used for physical injuries. Great. That makes sense. We can go from there. Instead, you're like, maybe they can, if I have to say maybe this, maybe that, the entire movie, then the lore is not well explained enough for me to make heads or tails of this world.
Kind of folding into that. So they use the polyjuice potion to break into the Ministry of Magic. You made a really interesting point last night when you were like, yeah, so that one movie, they went to the Ministry of Magic like after hours or whatnot, and no one was there. And so they decided to go, and maybe they decided to go when there was a bunch of people because they wanted to make sure they got to Dolores Umbridge. I don't know.
Well, they didn't know she had it on her person. They just knew that it was there and probably in her office. So it does not make sense. You would go to essentially let's put this in layman's terms here. It would be like, we know that one of the senators in the United States has a rare Pokemon card, and we're on the journey to get all the Pokemon cards in the world. We know he keeps it in his office. So either A, we go when there's nobody there and try to see it, or we go when everybody's there and try to see it. And that's the equality here of the situation. They've decided, let's go to the place where everybody wants to hurt us, capture us, or worse. Let's go where all of that is happening and hope we can do everything we need to do within the time frame of the usefulness of the polyjuice potion before it wears off.
Couple things. The Ministry has no like security checks because obviously anyone could do this. And they're just like, hey, you look like the person, you probably are the person. But polyjuice potion exists, and they're literally like in wartime at this point. And this is not really part of this argument, but they're going full Nazi, interviewing people and like making sure bloodlines are like the way they want them to, and like.
And we're not talking like Nazi in the sense of just actions. They literally have like stormtroopers on the premises. They literally have 1938, 1939 Nazi propaganda posters, modified for Hogwarts, modified for Harry Potter, but it's the same fonts, the same color, the same design as those posters.
Yeah, they're laying on thick. They're laying it on thick. They're like, we are that. Like, we that right there, give it to us. This is what we want.
Also, and you're not telling me that day one we've decided to take over the Ministry. You didn't tell me that they're not going to have a rule where wands are checked at the door.
Yeah, they're just flushing people in through the toilets, and they're just
people walking in with wands and the ability to do whatever they want whenever they want, and you're just like, we hope that everybody obeys the rules.
Yeah. So, and then they get the locket. The polyjuice potion wears off of Harry, but no one else. They go through like the main center area of the Ministry of Magic. It's just him. It's just Harry out in the open, and Ron is like mistaken for this woman's husband, and she's kind of keeping them behind or whatnot. And I'm screaming at the screen. I'm like, why is no one noticing that he is right there? Like, his face is plastered everywhere on wanted posters, or actually not wanted posters. What are they called? Like,
yeah, no, bounty wanted posters.
No, they were called like undesirables or whatever. But anyway, and suddenly some guy's like, oh look, it's Harry Potter, and then the chase starts. But he's like a solid 5 minutes just there, and no one like notices him.
So the thing that really got me angry, so they are obviously polyjuiced up. They are looking like other people. If you go back to the wedding, one of the people that is helping to try to protect Harry and, you know, is on the side of good is Mr. Weasley, the dad of Ron Weasley, but also he works at the Ministry in like Muggle to human relations. Muggle to wizard relation. And they, again, just one more little refresher. After the wedding, they got scattered. They have no contact with anybody, none of their friends, none of the people who want to help them. And so they are lost without hope. They're 3 kids lost without hope. And they're in this elevator and look who walks in, but Ron's dad, one of their allies, one of the people who could actually do something for them. If nothing else, like you could have a tender moment or something like that where like the dad's like, I was worried about you, Ron. Like, I'm so glad you're okay. Or like just like a brief hug to be like, it's going to be okay. We're going to figure this out. He gets in the elevator with them. And yeah, somebody else gets in. They don't get his attention at all. They don't try to pull him back. They don't try because they sound like Ron and Harry, and he would be able to recognize them quickly. And he's been experienced with magic enough he could figure it out what happened. They don't get his attention at all. That is literally the last time we see him this movie.
They tell him because Harry finds out that he's being investigated by the Ministry, and he tells him as that other guy. But he does have Harry's voice. But he tells him he's being looked at.
But the dad doesn't hear that. He hears, oh, you're threatening me. You're threatening me because he sees the other guy. And I'm like, if I was Ron and I had a moment where I thought either my dad was dead or that I would never see my dad ever again and that I was on this life or death mission and I had a brief moment where I got to see him one more time and I got confirmation he was alive and okay, I'm going to do whatever it takes to at least get one last I love you, or I'm it's me, I'm here, I'm okay, I'm going to do whatever I can. And he was literally in the same elevator with him and he did nothing. And that is probably the breaking point for this movie for me, where it's like that defies all logic because this guy he's a kid. Even if he's 18, he's still a kid and he's being thrust into a very hard situation he's never had experience with. And the one person he could trust the most is right in front of him and he doesn't do anything.
We are running out of time, so I'm gonna
I apologize.
I'm gonna pick 3 things real quick. We're gonna talk about them, and then we're gonna talk about the Deathly Hallows and the reveal of them, and then the good morals that we did see in the movie. So that's our little itinerary. Quick 3 things, and we'll just talk about them. But I did want to mention them. We had a question. Why do some wizards dress from different times? How are the Muggles explaining the things that are magically happening in the world? Because they have consequences too. Like a family gets murdered or something like that.
Yeah. So in the regular world news, like people are just getting murdered and like a bridge is destroyed and like London is losing power because of actions of wizards. And there's no like the wizards are trying to contact the Muggle world and like warn them of some danger, or there's nothing. So it's literally like a nightmare for them because all they're seeing is people are just randomly dying and things are exploding and bridges are falling apart and there's no reason for it because they don't believe in wizards.
Or they don't know about wizards.
Right. And so this is just an awful situation because nobody's trying to help them, and innocent people are going to end up being like killed because there's no communication at all. Because and this is not, the good wizards have nothing against Muggles except for like they shouldn't see magic. That's it. The bad guys have.
Well, no, there's this whole thing of like, oh, they're lesser than us.
Well, that's mostly the Slytherin clan that says that.
Because there's like wizards that believe that they're better than all the rest of the human race. They're higher, their bloodline's higher, and then there's others that are like, no, some are magical and some are not. And that's like the big
crux of the movies.
Yeah.
But nobody's willing to be like, hey, maybe we should just like try to do something for these poor people, because you're talking like 90% of the population, 80% of the population are regular people.
Also, they're in the line of fire now.
Yeah.
They are endangered.
Yeah.
Okay, and then Harry has a bunch of visions in this movie, and we only see it through his point of view, but part of us was like, can we just see them? As the audience, can we just see what he's seeing so we can get a better grasp of what's going on?
Because I kept saying this multiple times, the stuff we are seeing in this vision, yes, it is scary. Yes, it's literally Voldemort torturing and interrogating and being a bad guy. But it's way more interesting than watching 3 teenagers yell at each other and fuss about like silly stuff. I'm like, I'd rather, you're trying to sell this Voldemort character as the bad guy, as the biggest threat. And in this movie, the movie before the last movie, we get less than 30 minutes of screen time with him, about 20 minutes of screen time with him. And he's supposed to be the big bad guy. And like so far out of 7 movies, has he gotten maybe 2 hours of screen time? Probably less.
like showing more of him trying to find the Elder Wand and like interrogating people and kidnapping people would have been a way to break up the camping and the walking, and would have helped the pace of the movie. So yeah, I feel like they should have done that. I feel like it was a bad move to like keep that in the shadows, because we needed something. We needed something for a good chunk of this movie. And then another thing, I know I'm just like rolling through them, but the cinematography in this one was weird. So we said that sometimes it looked like a documentary, like the way they filmed it. Other times they had a tense, like shaky handheld cam to make it look really dramatic. There's this one scene where these bounty hunters are chasing them through the woods. The way it is filmed, like I couldn't physically watch it. Like I was getting like motion sickness. It was just like flashes of like Hermione, Harry, Ron, and then it was like their feet, and then it was like woods, and then it was like weirdly silent. Did you remember that? There was no music or really any sound effects.
Yeah, and the music stopped, and you hear like crunch, crunch, crunch of their feet, and then like a little bit of breathing, and that was it. And I just don't understand, because there were several moments where it was shot very much like an art house film, and then there was sometimes it was shot like a documentary, and then sometimes it was shot for some reason grainy. Do you remember those moments? There was a couple moments where they were sitting like at the water or something like that, and it was like it looked like a movie you got in like a VHS. Yeah,
it had like some noise, film noise, not film noise, but like that like colorful grain that's like almost like static.
Yeah,
it's called noise. Yeah,
right. And I'm like, what? Why? There's, I mean, you know, we'll never know exactly why, but it literally felt like you asked 5 different people to direct and film this movie, and then each one got to do their own cinematography, and they just pasted it all together.
Yep. So those were our little minor things I wanted to talk about. Oh, another thing about the cinematography. It is too dang dark. There's sometimes I can't see anything. It is like barely the outline of like, there's one point where they're taking Harry into the Malfoy Manor, and I literally all I saw was like the little like pillars that like line their walkway. That was it. It was like I saw the highlights of those, the roof, and then like the little heads of like Harry and the other guy. And then when they were at the Godric's Hollow, when they were at that place, it was so dark. Like I was like, I can't stop being so dark. You can make it nighttime and not actually have it physically dark. I don't know why films do that. They've been doing that for years now, and it's like, actually, going back to Lord of the Rings, Peter Jackson has this quote where they're lighting one of the big battles, and he puts this light on these soldiers, and either the cinematographer or the director of photography, he asks him, he's like, how is this light motivated? So motivated light means like you put a light on this person and you're like, oh, this is motivated by this lamp that's in the room. So it's not actually from the lamp as a light source, but like when you watch it, your brain would be like, this is from that lamp on the table or whatever. So it's like a way of making light realistic by being like, where would this light be coming from? And he says in the movie, he says, the light is motivated by the audience's need to see and feel this scene. He says that it's fantasy, high fantasy. And so the light is motivated because we need the audience to see these soldiers in this way. And I was like, you know what? It worked there. Let's just bring that idea back at least a little bit. I don't know why everything is so dark, and not even Harry Potter, but in a bunch of movies now. Do you want to add anything on that?
Well, it's not about the lighting. It's about the dialogue. Like, so when we first put on this film, we started watching it, and they are speaking not only so fast, but in such a thick British dialect. And all of these names and names of objects, names of people are so ridiculous and outlandish. You mix all 3 of those together, it was incomprehensible. We could not understand what they were saying because they were speaking so quickly, and there was no diction and there was no enunciation. We had to put subtitles on. And now again, this is nothing against the British dialect or British people. It's about the fact that you've already got words that are not English words that are being thrown around, that are like, what is a gobbledygooker wizard wand man? What is that? You know, what are these weird names? Who are these people? Especially like when we started this film, there was like 3 new people that just threw at us.
I know. And their names were like Mimsy Pimsy Poppenheimer.
Right. And you're like, what's a person and what's the name of an object? But then they've got a thick British accent, and multiple people have different versions of it.
And they're using slang, British slang.
And they're speaking fast. And I'm supposed to get all this information they're saying for plot purposes, if I'm forced to put subtitles on, not because I want to make sure I hear everything, but so I can actually understand dialogue for the plot, that's a problem. I missed like the first 10 minutes. I was like, what is happening?
Yeah, our subtitles weren't working on this one.
And so I was like, what is happening? Because all I kept hearing was all this red voice.
Yeah.
And it was like, blah, 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 blah. I was like, stop, please.
And then also, we watched this on Peacock because HBO took them down. They took them off. So we watched this on Peacock, which is fine. But our, do you know what I'm about to say? Our version was like weirdly edited for TV.
Yeah,
and we kept getting these weird like black fade outs. Like it was going to cut commercial. And it never did.
And so I'm like, did we miss part of this movie when it cut to commercial? Because it would just like fade out and then fade back in. We're in a new scene. I'm like, is this natural?
I don't know if that's in the final cut of the movie or not. I don't think it is. Maybe it is.
Maybe we missed all the explanation of the stuff that we don't know. But literally it was like, I was waiting for the ads for like Carvana and stuff like that to pop up, and it would just fade out, fade back in. We're good. And I'm like, did we miss something?
Yeah, we have to watch the last one on Peacock too, so I don't know if that's going to be like that. If it is like that, then I will know that I guess they just got a certain edited version that was like for a certain like, because the Harry Potter movies are on TV all the time, so there's probably an edit out there that allows for like commercial breaks and stuff. But
don't worry. I was about to say, don't worry, honey, because I'm not going to watch this again for a very long time.
Okay, so we are going to talk about the Deathly Hallows, the actual items. We're going to talk about them, and then we're going to go to the last point, and then we will be done. So we learn in this movie, and this is so typical of Harry Potter, we get new information about new items in this universe, and it's like, by the way, you need this thing right now. And you're like, okay, I just have to accept this part of the universe, and now it's like a part of the stakes. But we find out that, so there's this symbol that we were actually talking about that we hadn't seen yet, but it comes up in this movie about the triangle with the circle and then the line through it. And it is a little symbol that is the all the three Deathly Hallows. So the line is the Elder Wand, and the circle is the stone. And the triangle is the cloak. And basically, did they say they just need the Elder Wand, or do they need all three?
If you have all three, you control death itself. Basically, you are immortal.
Okay, so they find out that Voldemort wants the Elder Wand. And the reason why he wants the Elder Wand is because Harry's wand and his wand their cores come from the same phoenix bird. And so they can't destroy each other with them. So he wants a more powerful wand so he could kill Harry. And so he does find the Elder Wand. But now I'm trying to remember, do they need to find all three or the other two? Is that what is going on?
It doesn't seem like that's something that Voldemort wants right now, which, once again, you would think, I'm like, okay, he wants to rule the world ish. He wants to at least rule the wizarding world. You would think he would have stated like 3 movies ago, like he wants to own the Deathly Hallows. And then they could have had like a Dumbledore scene where he's like, this is the Deathly Hallows, instead of like jamming it into a fairy tale sequence in this movie, which, again, you would think he would want something that would give him immortality without having to, do the whole Horcruxes thing.
It would make sense that he would want to get all of the 3 Deathly Hallows then, but I guess he doesn't. He just wants the wand. Okay, and then
here's Have we even seen the rock yet?
Yeah, but the question about the cloak. Is Harry's cloak a Deathly Hallow? The invisibility cloak?
Then didn't he get that from his dad?
Yeah, so does that mean he's like related to the 3 brothers?
I don't know. The problem is, again, all this is based off of a fairy tale that just happens to be true. It's like, this is a fairy tale from a fairy tale book that it was like, oh, by the way, this is actually a true story, and these objects are real, and they are really, really dangerous, and you're telling me that this is being told to everybody now. And I'm like, I just don't understand. If we found out that the 3 little pigs turned out to be a true story, and that each one of the houses was symbolic of like an actual threat to the world, that they better not all be possessed by the same person or company or nation, I have a feeling we would have learned about it pretty early on in our lives, instead of like, mid-20s, like, oh, but when it's dangerous, and like, oh, somebody owns 2 of them or something like that.
Yeah, so I don't know what the second part of the Deathly Hallows is going to be. I don't know what they're going to do. I know they have to find the other Horcruxes. I don't know if they're going to come back up again, but it is in the title, so there's that. The last thing we're going to talk about is the good morals that we did find in the film, the positive things, the things that reminded us of our faith, our Christian values, and our love for Jesus. So I wrote down, so it is true they just bring Dobby back to kill him. But the way that Dobby goes about it, he has courage and loyalty, and he's willing to put himself on the line for what was right, because he is about to like move them out of the place of the Malfoy Manor, and Bellatrix is basically yelling at him and calling him like a slave and things like that. And he's like, I am not a slave. I am a free elf, and I'm going to help my friend. And he's so determined. And of course, he ends up dying for that. But then he doesn't regret that. He dies with Harry Potter, but he basically tells him that he was happy that he got to be his friend, and that dying with his friend, Dobby assures Harry that he does not regret giving up his life for his friends, which is actually a verse from the Bible. Those who lay down their lives for their friends, something that's very Christ-like. And so that was a wonderful scene. It was very sad, but I was inspired by it. And then Draco doesn't really have a part in this movie. He's in the background, but he does seem to be turning to the good side because of the horrors he has seen under Voldemort. And that's something I resonated with too, because it's like Draco himself is seeing the evil around him, and he is looking for the good, and he is making that, he has that conscience within him that's letting him know like this is wrong, this is bad, and he's starting to question why he's aligning himself with it. And so instead of like obeying the idol of like, I want to be my father's son, I want to be accepted, I want to be loved, he's like, is this really what's right? Is this really what I want? And it seems like Draco's wanting to be good, to fight for good instead. We're slowly seeing that creep up in him in the background. So those are my two things. I'll let you take it away.
I only have one thing, and I think it's just really that doing the right thing doesn't always have the positive results immediately that we want. Sometimes doing the right thing has negative consequences, that has consequences in general, that sometimes because everybody else is not doing the right thing, you standing up for doing what's right, defending good, defending justice, will sometimes have a immediate or soon to be immediate negative outlook, negative situation. Some people may get harmed. Some people may get hurt emotionally, physically, spiritually. But in the long term, it is worth it, that doing the right thing is what's going to make the difference that'll stand the test of time. And so we see in these movies where them choosing not to give up, even when it's hard, them choosing to keep pursuing the solution to this situation, to defeating Voldemort and freeing their friends. I mean, let's face it, they could have, when Hermione was captured and they were in the dungeon, they could have had Dobby disapparate them away and leave Hermione there. They didn't. They willingly risked their lives to free her, and the consequence was Dobby's life. But because they did that, Dobby died the way he wanted to, which was defending his friends, and now they got their freedom and they got their friend, and yeah, there's a consequence to it, but in the end this is the right choice, because they fought for justice, and they fought to free their friend, and they fought for what was right. But then this movie does show that there's consequences, that people are going to have to struggle to defend what is right.
Yep, all good things. So we have one more movie left in the Harry Potter series. We have one more left, one more podcast, and then we will be officially done with Harry Potter. How are you feeling about that, Will? Okay, he's just nodding. Okay. So that'll be it for us on this podcast. We hope you enjoyed listening, and we also hope you join us for the last installment of the Harry Potter series as we go through it. I'm Hannah, and that's Will, and we'll see you guys later. Bye.
Bye.